Right now, as you listen to this, the most powerful medium on Earth is being, well, gatekept.
Yeah, highly gatekept.
And not by billionaires or, some shadowy media conglomerate, but
Yeah.
by a piece of software called a timeline.
Right, the editing timeline.
Exactly. Because for the last 2 decades, if you wanted to tell a compelling, cinematic story online, you had to sit in front of a glowing screen and spend hundreds of hours manually cutting, syncing, and polishing these microscopic fractions of a second.
It's grueling work.
It really is. It's this invisible wall that keeps basically 99% of human stories off the internet. But today, we're doing a deep dive into a piece of writing from 2026 that proves that wall isn't just, cracking.
No, it's coming down.
Yeah, an entirely new breed of artificial intelligence is actively tearing it down.
It really is a structural collapse of an entire industry's bottleneck. We are analyzing a fascinating and honestly highly prophetic post from a tech blog.
Yeah.
It's by Paramendra Kumar Bhagat, and it's dated March 24th, 2026. It carries this incredibly aggressive title, Netizen. The YouTube killer is coming.
It's a bold claim.
Oh, totally. But what makes this source material so critical isn't the hyperbole of the title. It's the meticulous, step-by-step breakdown of how the shift from generative AI to what is known as agentic AI is completely decentralizing video production.
And that is exactly why this matters so deeply for you listening to this deep dive right now. I mean, whether you're someone who just casually consumes media on your commute, or, maybe you're an educator trying to figure out how to keep students engaged.
Or a marketer, yeah.
Right. Or honestly, just a curious mind trying to navigate the digital world without drowning in information overload. This is your map. We're going to unpack the exact mechanics of a cultural revolution that's happening right under our noses.
We really are.
But to understand this so-called YouTube killer, we have to start with that invisible wall we just talked about. The author establishes right out of the gate that video is the undisputed king of human communication.
Which is empirically true, right? I mean, if you look at global bandwidth usage or consumption time, engagement metrics.
Pure cultural reach.
Exactly. Text and audio don't even come close to video. It sits at the absolute center of how the modern world learns, entertains, and informs itself. But the author makes a really brilliant linguistic distinction here.
Oh, I loved this part.
Yeah, he writes that for the vast majority of the population, video editing is not a skill, it is a wall.
Now, I actually have to stop you right there because I read that line in the source, and my immediate reaction was to push back a little.
Oh, really? How come?
Well, I mean, open any app on your phone right now. Open
Right.
TikTok, Instagram, whatever. You are instantly hit with a fire hose of millions of people posting videos every single second.
Right, right.
So how can the author possibly claim there is a wall when literally everyone and their mother is uploading clips of their daily lives?
It's a fair point, but it's because the author is drawing a very hard line between capturing and producing.
Okay, unpack that.
So, pointing your phone at your golden retriever doing a backflip and hitting the red button that's capturing, you are just opening a digital shutter.
Right.
But taking 3 hours of raw, messy footage from a family vacation and turning it into a cohesive narrative, that is production.
Right, because production requires assembly.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Production means you have to make 100 micro decisions. You have to comb through all the raw footage just to find the usable seconds.
Well, it takes forever.
It does. And then you have to establish a narrative arc. You have to lay down a primary audio track, smooth out the background hiss, and then layer what editors call B-roll over it.
The supplementary footage, right.
Right.
To provide visual context and hide the visual jumps.
Yep, the cutaways.
Yeah.
And then you have to color grade it so the lighting matches and paste the entire thing to the swell of a music track. I mean, the vast majority of people simply hit a wall of cognitive overload when faced with that process.
It's just too much.
It is technically demanding and punishingly time-consuming.
So capturing is frictionless and free, but assembly is overwhelmingly expensive, at least in terms of, time and cognitive load.
Precisely. And the author uses an analogy that perfectly frames the magnitude of what's about to happen. He compares this impending shift in video to the revolution we already lived through with smartphone photography.
Okay, let's explore that, because I think we take the smartphone camera completely for granted now. We really do.
We absolutely do. I mean, think about photography before the iPhone. It had immense friction.
You needed a dedicated, expensive piece of hardware.
Right. And you had to understand exposure triangles, shutter speed, aperture, ISO. You had to buy film, physically take it to a lab, and pay to have it developed.
I remember going to the drugstore and waiting days for photos I didn't even know were in focus.
Exactly. And even when early digital cameras arrived, you still had to take a memory card out, plug it into a computer, offload the files.
Set them in complex desktop software.
Yeah, and then figure out how to manually host them on a server just to share them.
It was a deliberate, laborious process. You didn't just casually take a photo of your lunch unless you were willing to put in the work to process it.
Exactly. But then the smartphone collapsed that entire supply chain into a single frictionless action.
It really did.
The hardware, the processing lab, the editing software, and the distribution network were all compressed into a piece of glass in your pocket. The barrier to entry vanished overnight.
Wow.
The author points out that the result was an explosion of billions of daily images, entirely new digital economies, and new ways of documenting the human experience. The mantra became point, tap, share.
But wait, hold on. When smartphones collapsed the photography barrier,
Yeah.
it didn't just make everyone a brilliant artist.
No, definitely not.
It flooded the internet with an unfathomable amount of absolute garbage. Blurry photos, pointless selfies, millions of pictures of identical sunsets.
Yes.
So if this new technology collapses the video barrier in the same way, aren't we just going to drown in a sea of perfectly edited, AI-generated mediocrity? How does this lead to some utopian Hollywood in every language, as the author suggests, and not just its suffocating digital landfill?
That is the exact existential dread the tech and media worlds are grappling with right now. And he also does address it when he gets into the concept of discovery algorithms, which we will definitely dissect later.
Okay, good.
But his core argument is that before we can even worry about sorting the content, we have to recognize that the capability to create it is being democratized. Video has been waiting for its point, tap, share moment, and the author argues that the technology to deliver that moment has finally arrived in 2026.
But it's not just like better cameras on our phones, right? The actual capturing hardware isn't the breakthrough here.
Oh, the cameras are already incredible. The breakthrough that tears down the wall of assembly is a fundamental paradigm shift in artificial intelligence. We are moving from generative AI to agentic AI.
Okay, this is the crux of the whole piece. I really want to make sure we nail this distinction, because AI is such a bloated buzzword right now that it almost means nothing.
It really is.
Generative versus agentic. Let's break down the actual mechanics.
Sure. The best way to understand generative AI, which includes the early versions of ChatGPT or tools like Midjourney that generate images, is to view it as a highly capable but completely reactive prompt machine.
Reactive, meaning it waits for you.
Exactly. It operates on a strict one-to-one transactional basis. You give it an instruction, it gives you an output, and then it goes to sleep.
You know, I was trying to visualize this earlier, and I kept coming back to the idea of a fast order cook.
Oh, that's a good one.
Generative AI is like walking into a diner and saying, I want a cheeseburger, medium rare, no onions. The cook turns around, makes exactly that, puts it on the counter, and completely stops moving.
Right. They don't do anything else.
Exactly. If you realize you also want fries and a milkshake, you have to place a brand new, explicit order. The cook doesn't anticipate your needs, it doesn't plan a menu, and it certainly doesn't manage the rest of the restaurant. It just executes single, isolated tasks based on direct prompts.
That is a perfect encapsulation of generative AI. But the leap to agentic AI fundamentally alters that dynamic. You aren't just giving an order to a line cook anymore.
So what is it?
The author describes agentic AI as possessing goal-oriented autonomy. In your analogy, it's like hiring a Michelin star head chef, a sous chef, and a sommelier all at once.
Right. You don't ask for a burger. You walk into the kitchen and say, I am hosting a dinner party for 12 people on Friday. The theme is rustic Italian. 2 of the guests are gluten-free, and we have a budget of $500. And then you just walk out of the kitchen.
And this is where the magic happens. The agentic AI takes that high-level goal and begins to reason. It doesn't just generate a single output. It breaks your goal down into a multi-step plan.
It figures out the how.
Yes. It realizes it needs to build a menu. It autonomously queries an external tool, maybe an online grocery database, to check ingredient prices to stay under your budget. It creates a prep schedule. And crucially, it recognizes the constraints. It must alter 2 of the dishes to be gluten-free. It executes the cooking, plates the food, and pairs the wine.
It's a difference between automation and agency. Automation does exactly what it's told blindly. Agency understands the why behind the task.
Exactly. And translating this to video editing is what the author focuses on. We are moving from a world where a creator sits at a desk thinking, okay, I need to manually scrub through this clip, find the exact frame where she stopped speaking, make a cut, drag the audio track over, apply a crossfade, and then search a stock library for a clip of a city street to cover the transition.
Which again takes hours of tedious mechanical labor.
Right. But the agentic mindset shifts the creator from being a mechanic to being a director. The new workflow is you dump 50 gigabytes of messy, raw footage into a folder.
Just a total mess of files.
Yep. And you give the agent a prompt like, turn this 3-day conference footage into a punchy, high-energy 4-minute promotional reel. Focus on the keynote about renewable energy. Make sure the CEO looks authoritative and pace it to upbeat electronic music. And the agent just goes to work.
It builds the house instead of handing you a saw.
Exactly.
But here is the question that I think anyone logically has to ask. People have been promising that AI will edit our videos for like 5 or 6 years now. We've had tools that automatically trim silent pauses or auto-generate captions. Why is the author pointing to this specific moment right now in 2026 as the actual tipping point? What suddenly changed?
The author cites a piece of analysis from the venture capital firm Andreessen Horowitz dated January 2026. They explicitly stated it's time for agentic video editing.
And why is it time?
Because 3 very specific technological pillars have suddenly converged and matured at the exact same moment.
Okay, let's dissect these 3 pillars because I want to know exactly how this machine actually operates. The author lists Pillar 1 as advanced vision models. Now, the text says these models can watch and comprehend massive video libraries.
Yes.
But I am inherently skeptical of the word comprehend when applied to a computer. Does the AI actually understand what it's watching, or is it just scanning pixels to identify objects?
Yeah.
Like, does it just draw a bounding box around a person and say, human detected, or does it understand that the human is crying?
It's a fantastic question, and the answer is what separates this era from everything that came before. Older machine learning models were indeed just object detectors. They could scan a video and tell you there's a dog in frame 400.
Right.
But advanced vision models in 2026 process temporal context. They don't just look at a single frame, they analyze the progression of frames over time.
So they are watching it as a continuous stream, like a human does.
Yes, and because they process it temporally, the source explicitly states they can spot story beats.
Wait, really? Story beats?
Yes. They analyze the micro-expressions on a speaker's face, the tone and cadence of their voice, and the physical action occurring in the scene. They can differentiate between A-roll, the primary narrative footage where someone is perhaps speaking directly to the camera, and B-roll, which is the environmental footage used to set the scene.
Wait, how does it know the difference? If it's just looking at pixels, how does it mathematically conclude this shot of a coffee cup is B-roll, but this shot of a guy talking is A-roll?
Because it uses multimodal analysis, it listens to the audio track while watching the video, it recognizes human speech patterns, cross-references them with the visual presence of a talking subject, and tags that as primary narrative.
Okay, that makes sense.
Then it sees a sweeping drone shot with no prominent dialogue and tags it as supplementary context. But it goes deeper. The text notes these models can map out pacing and emotional arcs. It can literally quantify the tension in a scene based on the speed of movement, the volume of the audio, and the lighting, and assign it an emotional weight.
That is wild. It's not just cataloging files. It's watching the raw footage with the eye of an editor, looking for the climax of a story.
Exactly.
Okay, so it has this incredible contextual vision. Where's Pillar 2?
Pillar 2 is what makes that vision actionable, tool-using agents. Because understanding the footage is completely useless if the AI is trapped inside a chat window.
Right.
It's like having a brilliant Hollywood director who is paralyzed and locked in a glass box. They can see what needs to be done, but they can't physically operate the editing software.
Right. How does the brain actually get its hands on the timeline?
The author specifically points to models like Claude Code as the breakthrough. These agents can now autonomously write scripts and execute API calls to interact with complex desktop software.
So they're remote controlling the software.
Essentially, yes.
Right.
They aren't just generating a text document that says, hey, human, you should cut it timestamp 2.15. The agent is actually reaching into software like Adobe Premiere or Blender. It is manipulating the metadata of the timeline. It is autonomously placing in-points and out-points on the clips, dragging them onto the sequence, creating new audio tracks, and applying color correction values.
So it's operating the heavy machinery. It is the virtual hands on the keyboard.
Precisely. Which brings us to Pillar 3, rich training data. We have the brain that understands the story and the hands that can operate the software. But how does an AI know what actually constitutes good taste?
Yeah, how does a machine know that a cut feels too abrupt or that a music swell is too cheesy? Taste is so subjective.
It's subjective to an individual, but across millions of data points, patterns emerge. These models have been trained on millions of hours of successful, human-edited video.
Okay.
They have internalized the mathematical rhythm of a highly engaging YouTube documentary, the rapid-fire dopamine hit pacing of a viral TikTok, and the slow, deliberate cadence of a prestige cinematic film. They draw on all that historical data to inform their autonomous decisions.
So they recognize the patterns of what works.
Exactly. They know that a dramatic pause in a documentary usually lasts between 1.5 and 2.5 seconds because they've analyzed 10,000 award-winning documentaries.
So if we take these three pillars, contextual vision, autonomous tool use, and a vast database of human taste, and we combine them, we get the agentic AI revolution.
That's the recipe.
But I know that for a lot of people listening, this still sounds a bit abstract. It sounds like magic. So let's look under the hood. The author provides a very meticulous breakdown of the anatomy of an autonomous edit. I want to walk through exactly how an AI goes from a folder of disorganized raw files to a polished, ready-to-publish video.
The workflow begins with the input phase. The human is still the initiator. You provide the raw assets, which could be 20 separate video files, some audio recordings, and maybe a folder of graphics along with a high-level goal.
So I have to tell it what I want.
Right. This goal could be a conversational prompt, like we discussed earlier, or a preset template.
Something like, make this look like an Apple commercial.
Exactly. Then the agent moves into the analysis phase. It deploys those vision models we just talked about. It scrubs through every single frame and every second of audio. It transcribes all spoken words. It logs the visual contents of every clip.
Sounds computationally heavy.
Oh, it is. But crucially, it also scores them. It assigns metadata tags like high energy, blurry, funny, or good lighting.
It's building a massive database of the ingredients it has to work with. But this next part is what fascinates me most. Once it knows what it has, how does it decide what to do?
That is the planning phase, and it relies on the agent's internal reasoning engine. The author gives a fantastic example of the AI's internal monologue.
Well, I love this part.
Yeah, it looks at the goal make an Apple-style commercial and looks at the analyzed footage. It essentially talks to itself. It says, okay, to achieve an Apple-style commercial, the pacing needs to be fast and kinetic. I need an energetic visual hook in the first 3 seconds to arrest attention. I have a clip tagged high energy that works perfectly.
It's reasoning through the constraints.
Exactly. It continues. Then I need to introduce the product with clean B-roll, and I need a massive music swell at the climax of the narrative.
It's literally storyboarding the video in its mind before it makes a single cut.
Yeah.
It's outlining a narrative strategy based on the constraints of the raw material.
Once the plan is formulated, it triggers the execution phase. This is where it calls in its tools. It generates a digital timeline. It trims the clips based on the plan, places them in sequence, and then it realizes, wait, the transition between shot A and shot B is visually jarring.
So what does it do?
So it autonomously searches an integrated stock library for a transition element, or perhaps it uses a generative model to instantly create a custom transition graphic. It drops that graphic in, it syncs the audio waveforms perfectly, it applies a cinematic color grade to ensure visual consistency, and it prepares the final export.
All of this happens in the background while you are essentially doing nothing. You're just drinking coffee waiting for it to finish.
Pretty much.
But what if it gets it wrong? What if it decides to use a take where I sneezed, or it completely missed the point of the video?
That brings us to the iteration phase, which ensures the human remains in the director's chair. The agent presents you with the rough cut, you watch it, and you give natural language feedback.
So I don't have to fix the sneeze myself.
No, you don't have to open the timeline yourself. You just type, the opening is a little slow, make it punchier, and swap out the electronic music for something more acoustic.
And it doesn't just slap a new song on it.
No, and this is crucial. Because it has goal-oriented agency, it understands that changing the music means the pacing of the entire video must change to match the new beat. So it goes back to the planning phase, recalculates the cuts to align with the acoustic track, and re-executes the edit.
It's iterative collaboration. But the author mentioned something in this section that absolutely blew my mind, and I want to spend some time on it. The concept of multi-agent setups.
Oh, this is fascinating.
Yeah, because we've been talking about this as if it's one hyper-intelligent AI doing everything.
Mm,
But the source says the reality of 2026 is an entire AI film crew working together.
right.
How does that actually work computationally?
This is where the architecture becomes incredibly sophisticated. Instead of one monolithic model trying to do everything, which can lead to hallucinations or errors in complex tasks, developers are orchestrating specialized agents that interact with each other.
Like a literal studio hierarchy.
Exactly. You might prompt the system with your concept. The system spins up Agent 1, which is specifically trained as a researcher and scriptwriter. Agent 1 analyzes your raw footage, extracts the key themes, and writes a narrative script. But Agent 1 doesn't edit video.
It stays in its lane.
Right. It passes that script to Agent 2, which is the visual editor. Agent 2's only job is to scour the footage for the visual elements that match the script and assemble the picture. Meanwhile, Agent 3 acts as the sound engineer, isolating dialogue and mixing the score.
And they talk to each other. The scriptwriter might say, "We need a dramatic pause here," and the visual editor replies, "I don't have the B-roll to cover a pause of that length." So they negotiate a solution autonomously before presenting the final cut to you.
The author emphasizes that this is the pinnacle of goal-oriented agency, not rule-based automation. Rule-based automation is rigid. If you tell a rule-based script to delete all silent pauses longer than 2 seconds, it will blindly chop up your video, even if that 2-second pause was an incredibly poignant, emotional moment. It doesn't understand context.
Right, it just follows the math.
But goal-oriented agency leaves the pause because the sound engineer agent understands the goal is to elicit emotion.
It's the difference between a machine blindly following a script and a synthetic entity making a creative choice. And the crazy thing is, this isn't science fiction. This isn't theoretical whiteboard stuff that might happen in 10 years. The source material provides a massive landscape of tools that are already shipping and executing these exact workflows in the wild.
It's happening right now.
I want to take a tour of these platforms because it grounds all this high-level theory in actual reality. Let's start with Mosaic.
Sure. The author starts by outlining a tool called Mosaic, which is described as a canvas for agentic editing. Its primary value proposition is completely autonomous, high-volume workflows. You feed it your raw assets and your goal, and it doesn't just give you one video back. It autonomously generates multiple distinct variants for A/B testing.
Let's pause on the implications of that for a second. If you are a marketer running an ad campaign, normally you spend your entire budget editing one really good video, and you just pray that the audience responds to it. If it fails, you're out of luck.
And you've wasted weeks of work. But with Mosaic, the agent handles all the cuts, transitions, and effects to build, say, 5 different versions. One uses a funny hook, one uses an emotional hook, one leads with a statistic, one uses fast pacing, and one is slow and methodical.
And it does all of this at the same time.
Yes, it builds all of them simultaneously without you ever touching a timeline. You deploy all 5, see which one the algorithm favors, and pour your budget into the winner. The cost of experimentation drops to 0.
That fundamentally changes the economics of digital marketing. Okay, the next tool the text highlights is Goldcast's Agentic Video Editor, which is integrated into their content lab. This one seems tailored for a very specific type of corporate pain point.
Yes. Goldcast targets the massive volume of talking head content that businesses generate: webinars, town halls, Zoom meetings.
The really boring stuff.
Exactly. It operates like a chat-based assistant. You feed it a raw recording of a 1-hour team meeting. It autonomously trims the dead air, identifies the key takeaways, adds accurate captions, overlays appropriate B-roll to keep it visually interesting, and applies your company's specific brand, styling your fonts, your colors, your logo.
The text mentions it uses preset recipes, which means the social media manager doesn't need to know anything about editing. They just select the LinkedIn promo recipe, and the agent turns out a perfectly formatted, branded clip in 2 minutes.
Exactly. It's plug and play.
Then there is Descript's Underlord, which honestly has the best name of any software I've heard in a long time.
It really does. Underlord is built around a very aggressive philosophy: the end of manual video editing. It operates as a tireless assistant that lives inside your project. It understands complex instructions to deliver a polished final cut. It goes beyond just removing filler words like and It can handle overdubs autonomously.
Wait, explain the overdubs feature, because the mechanics of that are fascinating.
Imagine you recorded a podcast and you accidentally said the wrong date for an upcoming event. In the past, you would have to set up your microphone again, try to match the exact room tone and vocal inflection, record the correction, and manually splice it in.
Which never sounds quite right anyway.
Right, it's so hard to match. With Underlord, you just highlight the text in the transcript, type the correct date, and the agent uses a clone model of your voice to synthesize the new audio, perfectly matching the inflection and tone of the surrounding sentence, and seamlessly inserts it into the timeline.
It alters reality without you having to re-record anything. That is terrifying and brilliant.
Yeah.
But what about high-end professional shoots? The author mentions a tool called Selects by a company named Cutback. This one deals with multicam footage, which, for anyone who has ever touched video editing, is absolute misery.
Oh, multicam editing is notoriously difficult. If you have 4 cameras filming a podcast or a live music performance, you have 4 massive video files that must be perfectly synchronized down to the exact frame, usually based on audio waveforms.
It's a logistical nightmare.
It is. Then, an editor has to watch the entire performance in real time, constantly switching between camera angles to ensure the active speaker is always on screen, while also cutting to wide shots for context. It is incredibly tedious prep work.
So what does Selects do?
Selects acts as an autonomous assistant editor. It ingests the massive multicam files, syncs them perfectly, analyzes the audio to track who is speaking, and makes autonomous editorial decisions about angle switching.
It just watches and cuts.
Yes. It delivers a fully structured, perfectly timed timeline. It essentially skips the first 10 hours of grueling prep work so the human editor can open the file and immediately start making high-level creative choices.
It takes away the heavy lifting so the human can focus on the art. But the author also highlights tools that are completely pushing the boundaries of what video editing even means. He mentions AdWave and Nemo Video.
AdWave is an agentic editor specifically designed for complex ad requests. It is highly interactive. If you ask it to build a commercial, it anticipates what it needs. It might stop and ask you, I notice you want a futuristic aesthetic, but the brand colors are earth tones. Should I override the brand colors or adjust the aesthetic?
So it's actively consulting with you.
Exactly. It breaks down complex requests, selects its own tools, and guides the human through the strategy while it executes the build.
And Nemo Video, because the example the text gives for this one is staggering.
Nemo Video, powered by an engine called OpenClaw, demonstrates profound context awareness. The source cites real-world demos where you feed this system a completely unstructured 2.5-hour recording of a keynote presentation.
Okay.
The AI watches the entire thing. It identifies the thesis of the speech, it tracks the audience's reaction to gauge the most impactful moments, and then, based entirely on its own editorial judgment, it autonomously compresses that 2.5-hour monolith into a tight, compelling 4-minute cinematic highlight reel.
I am still trying to wrap my head around the computational logic required to do that. It's not just looking for loud noises. It has to read the transcript, cross-reference it with the slides on the screen, identify the narrative arc of a human speech, and then autonomously scour the timeline for the exact visual moments that support that arc, aggressively discarding everything else.
It's incredible.
It is performing acts of high-level journalism.
It is summarizing complex human thought visually. And perhaps the most radical departure from traditional workflows mentioned in the source is Renoise AI, paired with Claude Code.
Oh, this is the one where they literally skip the timeline altogether.
Yeah.
When I read this, I had to stop and reread it 3 times. How do you edit a video without a timeline?
It requires a complete paradigm shift in how we think about digital media. Instead of a human dragging and dropping visual blocks representing clips onto a horizontal track, the agents program the video via code-like workflows.
Explain that. What does it mean to program a video?
Think of the video not as a sequence of clips, but as a mathematical equation or a set of instructions. The AI writes a script that says, at second 0, render image A. At second 2, apply zoom function of 120% while fading in audio track B. The agent is compiling the video in the background using code.
So the timeline just doesn't exist for the user?
No. The human never sees a timeline. They just interact with the code or the text prompts. The text claims this allows for massive scaling. You can start with a single product photo, and the code-based agent can generate 100 highly produced, distinct video ads in minutes because it's just running mathematical permutations.
It completely decouples video creation from the traditional graphical user interface. And just to prove that this isn't some niche toy for tech bros or YouTubers, the author specifically notes that the enterprise world is already buying in. Reuters, one of the largest, most rigorous news organizations on the planet, is actively deploying agentic AI.
Yes. Reuters is using it as a supercharged video editing system in their newsrooms. When raw footage of a breaking news event comes in, the Agentic AI instantly churns out a rough cut of the news segment, structuring the narrative and pulling the key sound bites.
Giving them a massive head start.
Exactly. That rough cut is then handed over to a human AI video producer for final oversight and ethical review before publishing. The speed of news delivery is exponentially increased.
So if we step back and look at this entire tool landscape, Mosaic, Underlord, Nemo Video, Reuters deployment, the central premise of the article becomes completely undeniable. The invisible wall has been demolished. The technical barrier to entry for high-quality video production is effectively zero. Which brings us to the macroeconomic and cultural impact and the central, massive paradox of the author's title, the YouTube killer.
Right. The author boldly declares that the YouTube killer is coming, but then almost immediately states that the YouTube killer will not actually kill YouTube.
Which is incredibly confusing on its face.
Mm.
If YouTube survives this revolution, why on earth call this technology the YouTube killer? What is actually being killed?
To understand the paradox, we have to analyze the economics and the architecture of current YouTube. The author argues that over the last decade, YouTube's entire ecosystem has been relentlessly optimized to favor highly polished, attention-grabbing spectacle.
Right.
The algorithm rewards massive production value, hyper-optimized thumbnails, and content that is scientifically engineered to maximize watch time and retention at all costs.
It's the Mr. Beastification of the internet. You have creators spending millions of dollars, employing teams of 50 people, just to build a real-life Squid Game set or survive in a bunker for 100 days, all to hold your attention for 15 minutes.
Precisely. It is an arms race of spectacle, and the author predicts that YouTube will continue to do exactly that, and it will survive doing so. However, it will undergo a massive shift in cultural perception.
How so?
It will become the premium tier. It will become the place you visit intentionally when you want that massive, big-budget, professionally produced dopamine hit. In essence, YouTube simply becomes traditional television.
Okay, so if YouTube just becomes the new NBC or Netflix, where is the killing happening? What is the technology destroying?
What is being killed is the idea of YouTube as the default monopolistic home for all video on the internet. The revolution happens in the layer beneath and beyond the spectacle. The author describes the emergence of platforms hosting a volume of video that is 1,000,000 times larger than YouTube is today.
1,000,000 times larger. That number is staggering. And that's not because Mr. Beast is suddenly going to post 1,000,000 times a day.
No, it is because everyday creativity, which the current YouTube algorithm actively suppresses or ignores because it isn't spectacular enough, is suddenly unleashed. The text refers to this massive influx of content as the continent of the long tail.
Let's unpack that phrase, because I love the imagery. In economics, we always talk about the long tail curve. You have the head of the curve, the few massive blockbuster hits that generate most of the revenue, and then you have the long tail, the millions of niche, obscure products that individually sell very little, but collectively make up a massive market share.
Right.
The author is saying that in the era of agentic video, the long tail doesn't just grow, it becomes an entire continent.
Exactly. We are talking about millions upon millions of ordinary people participating in high-level video creation simply because they finally can. The barrier is gone.
But hold on. This brings us right back to the existential dread we touched on earlier, the discovery problem. If you suddenly have a decentralized internet hosting 1,000,000 times more video content, how does anyone find anything? If I upload a beautifully crafted AI-assisted documentary about my grandfather's woodworking shop, it's just a drop of water in an ocean of 1,000,000,000,000 drops. The author states that discovery algorithms will have to evolve dramatically, but how do they actually do that in an era of pure abundance?
This is perhaps the greatest technical hurdle of the 2026 landscape. Current algorithms like YouTube's or TikTok's are fundamentally designed for scarcity. Their goal is to find the one universally appealing video that will keep the maximum number of people staring at the screen. They optimize for broad psychological triggers: shock, awe, controversy, fast pacing.
Right, they want to find the lowest common denominator that everyone will click on.
But in an age of absolute abundance, the author argues that algorithms must shift from optimizing for engagement to optimizing for semantic relevance. They have to transition from finding the video everyone wants to watch to finding the hyper-specific video meant only for you.
How does that work computationally?
Yeah.
How does an algorithm know what is hyper-relevant to me if it doesn't have millions of clicks to validate it?
It relies on the same advanced AI models that created the video in the first place. Instead of relying on human-written titles, clickbait thumbnails, or massive view counts, the discovery algorithm uses vision and language models to instantly watch and comprehend the actual content of every uploaded video.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it creates a high-dimensional vector map of the content. At the same time, it maintains a deeply nuanced, hyper-personalized vector map of your specific interests, your current context, and your learning style.
So it's not looking at views, it's matching the DNA of the video to the DNA of my curiosity.
Exactly. It's semantic matching at an unprecedented scale.
Okay, assuming the discovery problem is solved, what exactly does this long-tail content look like? If it's not massive spectacles, what are these millions of new creators actually producing? The author paints a truly vivid, almost utopian picture of how this democratizes global culture. He predicts the rise of localized Hollywoods. He writes, and this is a direct quote, "Any language group of just 100,000 speakers will be able to sustain its own Hollywood. Not a metaphorical one, a literal one." I want to really deepen this concept. What does a 100,000 speaker Hollywood actually look like?
It represents the complete decentralization of cultural power. Historically, high-quality cinematic storytelling requires immense capital. You need millions of dollars for equipment, crews, visual effects, and distribution.
Right.
Because the cost is so high, production is aggressively concentrated in major geographic and economic hubs, Los Angeles, Mumbai, London. And because investors need to recoup those massive costs, stories are exclusively greenlit based on their ability to appeal to massive, homogenized global audiences.
Right. You can't spend $200 million making a movie that only a niche community in Wales will understand. It has to appeal to everyone on Earth, which often means stripping away local nuance and specific cultural flavor.
But when agentic AI drops the cost of production and post-production essentially to zero, that entire economic dynamic flips.
Let's build out a concrete scenario. Imagine an indie filmmaker who is part of a small language group, say, a community of 100,000 native Navajo speakers. In the past, if they wanted to make an epic, visually stunning science fiction series deeply rooted in Navajo mythology, they would have to convince a studio in LA to give them $50 million, which would never happen.
Never. But in the 2026 landscape, that filmmaker doesn't need the studio. They write the script, they gather local actors, and shoot the performance on smartphones against a green sheet in a garage. Then, they hand that footage to an agentic AI.
And the AI does the heavy lifting.
Yeah. The AI autonomously keys out the background. It generates photorealistic, massive sci-fi environments based on the filmmaker's text prompts. It perfectly lights the actors to match the digital background. It mixes an epic, culturally authentic score.
They bypass the massive visual effects houses entirely. They create a $50 million aesthetic for the cost of a software subscription.
Exactly. The source argues that this capability will unearth local stories, local humor, local knowledge, and local talent on an unprecedented scale. We are talking about high production value films, episodic series, educational content, and news produced entirely by and for a community of 100,000 people. It preserves language, dialect, and cultural nuance in a way that centralized mass-market media simply cannot. It is the ultimate democratization of culture.
It's incredible. But the author's vision doesn't stop at entertainment. He points out a massive, fundamental transformation in how we consume information and news. He talks about the end of man bites dog news. For those who might not be familiar with the phrase, in traditional journalism, man bites dog is the classic definition of what constitutes a news story.
Right.
Dog bites man happens every day. It's normal, it's boring, nobody will read it. But man bites dog is rare, it's shocking, it gets clicks. The author has a really sharp critique of how this dynamic has shaped our reality.
Yes, he argues that our current digital media diet is entirely dominated by these man bites dog stories, and they are engineered to trigger anxiety, outrage, and fear. Because production and distribution are expensive, news organizations have to fight a brutal war for your attention, and the easiest way to win attention is with the most extreme, shocking content possible. It creates a distorted, highly negative view of the world.
But his vision for the agentic video era is the exact opposite. He says the new video ecosystem will flood the world with the humdrum, the normal, the quiet, everyday happenings.
Because the friction of production is gone. Anyone can quickly produce a beautiful, compelling video about a local neighborhood bake sale, or a teacher retiring, or a neighbor quietly repairing a park bench. The ecosystem naturally balances out the extreme shock news by drowning it in millions of stories of ordinary human connection. It becomes, in the author's words, news that informs without exhausting.
It's a profound psychological shift for the internet. moving from a machine that generates anxiety to a machine that reflects the actual mundane beauty of daily life. And briefly, the text also touches on how this impacts education, which seems equally massive.
It's a complete paradigm shift for the classroom. We're looking at a future where teachers and students are no longer constrained by static textbooks or generic mass-produced educational videos.
Give me an example of how that looks in practice.
A high school history teacher could identify that their specific class is struggling to understand the economic nuances of the Industrial Revolution. That evening, the teacher prompts an agentic AI with their lesson plan, and overnight, the AI generates a custom, animated documentary narrated by historical figures tailored exactly to the student's current curriculum and reading level.
And the students themselves become creators. Instead of writing a 10-page essay that only the teacher will ever read, a student can synthesize their research by directing a highly produced autonomous video essay. It completely changes how knowledge is demonstrated and shared. It really does sound like a utopia, a literal age of abundance. But the author is careful to ground this grand, sweeping vision in some current realities. It's not pure magic, and there are still significant friction points in 2026.
Right. He includes a critical section on lessons learned from real-world enterprise deployments. He emphasizes that the technology, while astonishing, is not completely hands-off yet.
What are the main roadblocks? What is keeping it from being perfectly autonomous?
The primary friction point is taste. For high-stakes, narrative-driven work like a brand's flagship commercial or an emotional documentary, human intuition is still an essential ingredient. The AI can build the house flawlessly, according to the blueprint, but a human still needs to walk through the rooms and decide if it actually feels like a home. Does the emotional resonance land? Is the pacing slightly too fast for the gravity of the subject? The human has to provide that final layer of soul.
The AI is the technician, the human is the artist. He also mentions edge cases, which I found really interesting.
Yes, the author notes that users constantly surprise the AI. Humans are inherently unpredictable. When you give them an open-ended, autonomous tool, they will attempt workflows or ask for outputs that the developer simply never anticipated in the training data. The agents sometimes struggle when asked to break the rules of traditional editing intentionally for avant-garde or highly experimental styles.
And then there's the purely human hurdle of organizational buy-in. He cites teams like Moments Lab, emphasizing that introducing this technology into a legacy corporate environment is difficult. Getting a traditional Pulitzer-winning newsroom or a massive corporate marketing team to trust a synthetic agent to touch their multi-million-dollar brand without messing it up takes immense time, proof of concept, and cultural adjustment within the company.
But despite these friction points, the author is unwavering on the trajectory. The roadmap he outlines for late 2026 is hyper-aggressive. He expects to see even deeper, seamless integrations of agentic AI directly into legacy professional tools like Adobe Premiere and DaVinci Resolve. The editing software will essentially become an active collaborator rather than a passive tool.
It will be watching the timeline with you, suggesting cuts before you even ask.
Exactly. Furthermore, he predicts that fully autonomous rough cuts will become the absolute standard baseline for all content formats. Starting an edit with an empty timeline will be viewed as an archaic practice. And ultimately, we will see the rise of super platforms that handle the entire end-to-end creation loop autonomously. From ideating a viral concept, to guiding the human on how to shoot the raw footage, to autonomously editing the assembly and finally optimizing and publishing it to the long-tail network.
The bottleneck isn't just cracking, it is being actively, aggressively dismantled. Which brings us to the author's final urgent message to anyone reading the piece. Whether you are a creator who gave up because it was too hard, an educator, a news producer, or honestly, just a person living an interesting life, his call to action is incredibly simple and powerful. Start filming everything. The agents are ready to edit it.
It's a mandate to stop worrying about the mechanics of assembly. The capacity to turn raw, lived experience into compelling narrative art is no longer guarded by a wall of technical complexity. The tools are waiting for your raw materials.
So let's pull all of this together. We started with the idea of a massive, insurmountable wall, the brutal bottleneck of video editing that has kept the vast majority of human voices, stories, and cultures locked out of the most powerful communication medium on the internet. And through this incredible 2026 source material, we've mapped out exactly how the tectonic shift from generative AI, the fast-order cook, to agentic AI, the autonomous AI film crew, is completely tearing that wall down. We are moving away from an internet dominated by a few massive high-budget spectacles fighting for our anxiety on the premium tier of YouTube.
And we are moving toward a decentralized, abundant continent of localized storytelling. The democratization of the media means the rise of a literal Hollywood for every language, every niche, and every community.
If you take one thing away from this deep dive, it should be what this age of abundance means for you personally. It means that your own voice, your own obscure interests, your specific language, and your local community suddenly have access to the exact same production value and narrative power as a major Hollywood studio. The tools are no longer the limiting factor. The only limit left is your imagination.
It is a profound leveling of the playing field.
It really is. But before we wrap up, it leaves me with a thought that honestly wasn't explicitly in the text, but has been echoing in my head as we've spent the last hour dissecting all of this. If agentic AI makes it completely frictionless to turn our mundane, everyday, messy phone footage into highly polished, perfectly paced, emotionally resonant documentaries of our own lives in a matter of minutes, how is that going to fundamentally alter human memory?
That is a fascinating and somewhat haunting question.
Right. Like, think about looking back at your life in 20 years. Will we start viewing our own personal histories not through the lens of quiet, unedited, messy reality, but through the perfectly paced, AI-edited highlight reels of our own making? If a synthetic agent is deciding which moments of your family vacation get the swelling, emotional music and which quiet, awkward moments get left on the cutting room floor because they don't fit the narrative arc, who is really authoring the story of your life? Are we finally gaining the power to tell our own stories, or are we just outsourcing our memories to an algorithm with really good taste?
It completely changes our relationship with our own past. We transition from remembering what actually happened to remembering the cinematic movie of what happened.
Exactly. It's something to chew on the next time you point your phone at something, hit record, and think about how you're going to edit it. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep asking questions, keep recording your reality, and as always, stay curious.